Hello, everyone. My name is Steve Foster, and I work in the medical device industry. I worked in quality, risk management, and R&D compliance for a bit over 20 years. Most recently, I've supported device cybersecurity and supply chain risk management. Over the years I've been in the industry, I've noticed changes in software and software development practices. I think it was around 2018 when I really started to notice the prevalence of open source software becoming more and more common in our industry. When I started working more closely with Node.js in the open source ecosystem, some of the courses that I took in updating my core competencies and more modern frameworks took me into this area where products and solutions are more and more found online. The issue is, how do you secure the supply chain? And so that's one of the things that me as a quality professional, risk management professional, has been focusing on in trying to find new and better ways in order to enable the use of open source software more safely and more securely for the benefit of our products and those who use them. So let's talk a little bit about building quality and sustainability in open source medical supply chains. Starting with a few topics, it really centers around risk management and going a little bit beyond static analysis. I want to talk a little bit about community as a centralized source entity and a bit about risk control decentralization. For medical device applications, open source is about software supply chain risk. You need to identify the risks inherent to the supply chain. For medical devices, risks are related to patient and user safety, risks related to information and network security, and risks related to local and global privacy. So I'll try to teach you about risk management here in 1 minute, and think about it in terms of safety, security, and privacy, because that captures the scope of the risk management issues that we need to address when it comes to the supply chain. There are 5 steps, the first of which is defining the harm. Harm could be in the form of bodily injury, file corruption, or medical information disclosure. All of these are harms with respect to any of the 3 dimensions we just mentioned. The next step is understanding and identifying the hazard. And to clarify, the hazard is the source of harm, what results in the injury. That could be a bad control algorithm that causes a device to do something inappropriately. It could be an insecure default configuration, not having sufficient security designed around the product that comes to the user. And then also the lack of encryption and having sensitive information that's a little too available than it should be. The third step is determining the risk. And for those of you who aren't experienced with risk management, it revolves around 2 primary dimensions: the probability of occurrence combined with the impact of the harm. Collectively, that defines the level of risk. You can have a high occurrence rate with a low impact, may not have as much risk, or you could have a very low occurrence rate with a high impact, which could have a comparable risk. Having high occurrence rates and high impacts are the worst of the worst, and you're trying to essentially reduce the risk by implementing and evaluating risk controls. If you can conduct functional testing, penetration testing, implement encryption algorithms, you're going to reduce the occurrence of a potential risk and therefore reduce the risk. And then ultimately, you're trying to establish the acceptability of the benefits of you're trying to achieve relative to the overall risks. And that's the simplest, shortest, concise way I can describe to you about risk management. But you can base a career on this slide, so I hope I did okay with just trying to summarize the basics of the process. And then, excuse me, also you need to document it and maintain it with new information. We're always learning about new ways our devices are used, new information about how products in the field are creating different circumstances that may not have been anticipated. So you're always updating and making your information as current as possible. So open source software in the medical device industry historically has not always been the preferred option. Securing software supply chains are among the highest priorities for connected medical device manufacturers. Most crypto algorithms and connectivity protocols are outside of device manufacturers' core competency, broadly speaking. We're bringing in more competency. We're bringing up engineers and as well as people that have experience in these types of technologies. But we have built our industry on software and medical professionals that are focused on medical treatment. So crypto algorithms and connectivity often need to be sourced from external sources, including potential verifiable open source solutions. Most control solutions involve third-party software scanners, continuous surveillance post-implementation. However, these aren't sustaining. These don't necessarily focus on the code itself and how you can continue to work with this code and possibly partner with authors of the code if they're not within your organization. So there's opportunities that exist for managed services that specialize in long-term open source sustainability. Open source software and supply chain risk management. Perceptions do exist that's in software security circles that open source software is not safe or secure. Open source software is soup, meaning it's software of unknown provenance. You don't know where it comes from. And in some cases, that's true. So we have to build on our counter arguments and reinforce the opportunities to improve that situation. Open source software as an open design can be more safe and secure than third-party software, primarily because of the skill sets in the communities and the broader scope of resources that are looking at some of these open source software codes. They can actually implement and identify vulnerabilities more so than, say, a single group of a design team that's in a third-party supplier. So the benefits of open design can be there as long as it can be leveraged. Open source software is not soup when supplied by a known, active, and healthy community. If you have an active, healthy community, that community is a single source entity. You just have to make sure that that community is healthy and active and able to interact with the users of the software in an effective way. So how do we assure safety, security, and privacy beyond static analysis and scanning? Well, with a medical device manufacturer, there's pre-market considerations and post-market considerations. In determining what types of software that you're going to need, you have to determine who's maintaining it. Or if nobody's maintaining it, who can maintain it? And once you decide who can maintain it, you have to assure that they will maintain it. From a post-market perspective, you're thinking about patch management, incident response plans, and any co-development capability if this is not part of your core competency. The functionality of this software requires some level of expertise. And if it's not in your internal organization, you have to figure out how do you establish maintenance capabilities. And that's where there's opportunities for communities and maintainers that would assure that products can continue on with open source dependencies, assuming that that infrastructure can be set up in advance and maintained going forward into the product's lifecycle. Centralizing community as a single source entity. We talk a lot about community as a decentralized entity. Well, in the case of supplier management, to the extent that you can centralize a community as a single source entity, you're going to have that benefit. So what makes a community a qualifiable single source entity? Well, a community that has secure SDLC best practices. It's great if you can establish that in a verifiable code of conduct, making sure that the processes and practices within a community are up to a certain level of standard that can be relied upon by those users, especially users that are in a regulated industry. Code source control measures. So how do you address source code that's coming from outside the community and being entered into the repositories within the community? Are there certain ways that they can be verified or confirmed or controlled in a way that maybe they haven't been in the past? If there's a certain set of controls that a community uses, it's good to take credit for those. Make sure that they're published in your documentation. Maintaining your code actively. We have to assure that open source code is not from a community that's not very active. You don't really know if those communities are actually going to be maintaining or will be there in the future if you decide to implement it. Having a community with support, communications, and points of contact are also key. If you implement something that you do not have that type of resource capability, that communication network, then you really don't have anywhere to go if you identify with these scanning tools that there's a vulnerability, or possibly if there wasn't a vulnerability at the time that it was implemented, then suddenly if there is something uncovered later on, then you're stuck with other types of requirements that you have to implement without adequate resources and capabilities. Healthy community metrics. That's something that is a developing area. How do we assure that a community meets certain metrics that are deemed to be something that communities can rely upon as a standard of existence for other industry to rely on? Among other opportunities, this is something that's a developing area for all of us. Risk control decentralization, community-led control nodes. These are concepts for further development, but they already exist by various communities that are actually supporting some of these things. Community to community code reviews. Sometimes as a network of communities that are trying to achieve a certain standard to support certain industries, especially those that are regulated, it's good if you could develop partnership networks so that independent reviews can be taken across each other. Even though you have a community that's already doing peer reviews of your code, communities cooperating with other communities can also bring other insights and perspectives that would benefit. The more and more different functionalities starts to become more interdependent. Standards engagement and leadership. There are a number of standards organizations, and communities can both be developers of code, but also they can be influencers of standards. Risk registry and ecosystem security. There's mutual benefit in trying to implement secure infrastructure in an ecosystem that's producing open source software code for any number of industry users. Competency development and training. Organizations like the Linux Foundation publish tons of training, hours of training that all open source communities can benefit from. A variety of open source competencies can be developed into academic curricula that can be shared across any number of communities. It's a way to build your ecosystem. It's a way to educate industry on how your tools can be used. An ecosystem is an environment of communities that could come together and actually raise the bar for users that really must contend with regulations that require these types of models. Open design community networks with industry participation. This is an area where I think would be great if industry could open up with some needs and functions that they would benefit from, but they may not necessarily want to put in the funding for product-specific implementations when a broader scope of functionality would benefit a broader suite of products along with the broader population. Security, encryption. These are areas that could benefit from substantial community development so that it prevents security vulnerabilities where the medical proprietary trades aren't going to be necessarily compromised. But security benefits us all. So if we have open design community networks, building secure solutions that are outside the scope of our functional requirements, there's definitely opportunity there. Testability and auditability of decentralized controls by industry. Industry is used to auditing and they're used to being audited. So communities that are open to this process for the benefit of receiving consultation as well as input can only benefit. And a number of services are already publishing that they're being certified by third parties. So being open to receiving third-party reviews is another opportunity to put a star on your community. Lastly, and this is more of an opportunity in the future, leveraging decentralized ledgers to drive integrity and incentive. Who has not heard of autonomous blockchain technology these days? Key technologies have arrived and are rapidly developing. Smart contracts, tokenization, a network of communities can build and maintain a secure interplanetary file system. IPFS allows for files to be linked to smart contracts via URI, which doesn't limit the size of those files. Code integrity drives value and distribution. Code value and distribution drives economic incentives. Yes, those of you that are putting this together, we are talking about blockchain technology and the ability to incentivize good work with the appropriate cryptocurrencies. Building safer, more secure future for the medical OSS ecosystem. Community centralization to support source identity. Decentralized community controls for increased integrity and quality. Leveraging decentralized autonomous organization models as economic integrity drivers. Let's talk. My name is Steve Foster. I'm a medical device professional. Thank you.